Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We've been doing a sort of heavy topic over the past few weeks by looking at rivers and all of the calculations. Coral reef destruction is a fairly simple topic for us to go through as it's a holiday, not to give you guys too much intense work today, right? So, what we are going to do today is we're going to look at the destruction aspect, which is all about environmental degradation, right? And coral reefs are one of the main ecosystems in the world, right? And they are actually being destroyed continually on a day-to-day basis, right? So you have like a lot of things like warming water, pollution, ocean acidification, which we'll get to, uh, overfishing, and physical destruction actually affecting our coral reef system, right? And basically, remember, or if you don't know, coral reefs, you can only find them in shallow waters. When it gets too deep, it affects their ability to get sunlight and thrive in those cold waters, right? So what happens is that because they're located so close to the shoreline and the water is so shallow, they are affected a lot by all of these activities that we engage in as humans. And when we describe their destruction, we can break them down into direct exploitation of the reef and its resources. So, like directly picking it, directly using too many fishery reserves, that direct destruction, or we can indirectly do it in terms of like human activities on the land. So, agriculture, the chemicals from agriculture can seep into the coral reef area, or you can have improper drainage and irrigation systems flowing into the ocean water, all of these things. So you have those direct versus those indirect effects of coral reef destruction. You guys are good with that? What we are doing as humans to cause coral reef destruction. And one of the key things is that while it may seem like a natural process, it actually has some sort of anthropogenic or human cause to it. So, you see that term anthropogenic? That's something we use in geography, which means a human source or a human cause. When it's time for you guys to do the exam, right? Because you guys are at the Form 4 level right now. When you guys are doing the exam itself, you may see explained to anthropogenic causes or anthropogenic forces, right? So they may not always say human causes, right? So how do you guys think we physically destroy coral reefs? What do you think are some of the things that humans do when they visit these coral reef areas to destroy them? So, like if they visited for some sort of tourism, what are some of the things that they can actually do to physically damage it?
They can throw trash into the water.
Right? So they can contaminate the water by throwing trash and all of these things. And yes, like Rochelle is saying, they also touch them or they break them apart, right? So one of the things is that there are different causes. And when we talk about the physical destruction of coral reefs themselves, it's linking those coastal development processes like dredging, quarrying, destructive fishing practices, the boat anchors damaging them, and recreational tourism uses, right? And one of the main things, right, is that humans actually walk on the corals. They break them apart, or sometimes the boat anchors can actually break them apart when it falls on them. So that is one of the physical destruction methods. So we'll get to Lima's point just now. So the physical destruction part of it. Then you have a lot of the fish reserves in the Caribbean actually come from the coral reef system. So, like Jamaica and Barbados and the Bahamas and all these areas have those coral reef systems, right? But one of the things is that there's overfishing taking place in these coral reef systems, and that has impacts on the food web. So if one type of fish is overfished, then it will affect all the other fishes that actually eat that fish, or animals that that fish may have eaten, right? So one of the things is like the grazing fish, which cleans the system and prevents the overgrowth of algae, right? And that is one of the most overfished species, especially in the Caribbean, right? And then you have this thing called blast fishing, where they actually throw explosives into the coral reef system, right, to get the fishes out and moving, and it can actually damage the coral reef system. So overfishing is a big thing, especially here in the Caribbean. Good. And then remember I was saying they pick them. Well, that idea of picking them is what we call coral harvesting, right? And what a lot of things, remember, it's all linked to the tourism industry, which we'll get to just now. Corals are picked to make jewelry and for souvenirs, right? And what happens is that there are different species of coral reefs. And these different species can be over harvested, which destroys the habitat and affects the biodiversity, which can have impacts on the algae, which can have impact on the fishes in these areas, right? And then when we look at the more, not the physical aspect itself, there is this idea which seems natural, but it's not really natural, right? So it seems natural, but it isn't. And we're talking about an increase in the ocean temperature, right? And what happens is that, remember, coral reefs need that specific temperature to survive in. They cannot survive in more than like 32 to 35 degrees Celsius, right? Because they need a particular temperature. Because of global warming and pollution, the atmosphere has higher carbon dioxide levels. So the ocean has higher carbon dioxide levels as well. So because of that, there's a rise in the atmospheric temperature and a rise in the ocean temperature. And what happens is that this increase in temperature actually kills the zooxanthellae or the algae, which the corals need to survive. And without that algae, they won't have their color. So they are undergoing coral bleaching because of that color. And because they're losing that algae, so you're seeing this coral reef. Coral reefs are very colorful. They are vibrant ecosystem. But now they have this sort of white color that is showing how the calcium carbonate structure of the coral polyps. And there'll be more and more bleaching over time that makes them vulnerable to like diseases and all of these things. So they eventually die. And a lot of the Caribbean coral reefs are being bleached, like in Tobago, and they're actually mapping areas on the eastern coast of Trinidad for coral reef bleaching. And now we're going to ocean acidification, right? So remember we said what happens in the atmosphere is mimicking what's happening in the ocean. When we talk about ocean acidification, we're talking about an increased amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere being absorbed by the ocean. So the ocean has more carbon dioxide now. So this is altering the chemistry of the ocean, right? And when the carbon dioxide, when we looked at limestone areas, when the carbon dioxide reacts with the ocean water, it creates a carbonic acid, right? So the CO2, the carbon dioxide, is mixing with the water in the ocean to create an acid. And because of that, that increasing the acidity of the ocean environment. You can also you can have that increase in carbon dioxide from emissions like fossil fuels, right? And what it does is that when the acidity of the ocean is increased, it actually dissolves particular minerals in the water, which coral reefs need to create their calcium carbonate shell. But now that is no longer there, so it's actually reducing their reproduction process. So their growth is actually slowed down. But the bad part about it is that if the water is extremely acidic, the coral skeletons can actually become dissolved, right? You guys are good with this?
Yes, miss.
Thank you.